broadcast.
What's that?
If he's good, we can call the meeting to order.
I'll wait for the text back here. Okay, you said ready.
Good. Marty, you ready?
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this month's USD 343 monthly Board of Education meeting to order. Start with ordering and approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Here a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor? 7-0. 3.0 consent agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda, including under section 3.5 employment recommendations, Brian Dammy as a substitute bus driver. Employee resignations, retirement, the resignation of Carolyn Courtney as PLMS, PLHS library para, the retirement of Pat Winchester as a PLHS industrial arts teacher effective at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, the retirement of Pat Zimmerman as PLMS 5th grade teacher effective at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, the retirement of Pat Hoopoff as a PLHS physical education teacher effective at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, the retirement of Mark Armstrong as a PLHS social studies teacher effective at the end of the 2020-2021 school year, and under section 3.6, the attendance requests as presented.
Thank you, Nick. Here a second.
Second.
Thanks, Jackie. Any further discussion? Not those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries 7-0. Is there anyone in attendance at tonight's board meeting who would like to address the board about something that is not on the agenda? Seeing and hearing nothing, because we have everybody here other than the usual suspects, we'll move right along. Welcome everybody, whether you be here live or virtually. Let's move right along to Board of Business, 5.1, 2019-20 fiscal year audit report. Mr. Fisher is here via Zoom.
Yep, Neil Phillips with us from Jared Gilmore Phillips. This again a little bit different this year. Neil's going to join us up on the screen this evening. He's going to give you the overview, the information from the 2019-2020 audit report that's prepared by his firm. So again, he'll give an overview. If you have any questions, be sure to ask him. Neil, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I was having computer troubles there for a minute. It looks like I had 2 meetings open too, so I apologize. Joined just in time. Good evening, Neil Phillips with Jared Gilmore and Phillips prepared your independent audit for this year. Has everybody got their audit in front of them or else able to see it?
We do. And it's in a packet too. The agenda along with
Let's turn this straight to page 1. The first paragraph talked about what we audited being USD 343 as of June 30th, 2020. The second paragraph talks about management's responsibilities and the fact that everything in this document is yours. They're your numbers, your representations with what happened during the year and how you ended the year. The next couple paragraphs talks about the auditor's responsibilities and the fact that we audit following auditing standards that are generally accepted in the United States of America, and we follow the Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide. And actually, the next 2 paragraphs talk about the fact that we are following a Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide, is the fact that we follow the regulatory basis of accounting, so we do not follow GAAP. They call it Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. The slang term is GAAP. Basically, it means that we do not record infrastructure. That's one of the biggest differences. And then, like the CAPER's liability would probably be the other big difference. We disclose that number in your financial statements, but in a GAAP audit, that's shown as a liability or an obligation of the district. The third paragraph down on page 2 is actually the most important paragraph in the entire document. It is what they call an unmodified opinion, which what that means to you is based on the testing we did, we feel like you have a materially accurate representation of what happened during the year and how you ended the year. So that means that we, based on the testing we feel like everything in your statements are materially correct. The next couple paragraphs talk about the supplemental information, and actually it goes over there on the page 3, talks about responsibility with the supplemental information, and the fact that you're going to see that we did audit all the numbers that are in the bound book there. So we did audit all of the documents. You turn to the next page, page 4, this is statement number 1. It's prepared to show users at a glance that you are in compliance with the cash basis laws of the state of Kansas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column over there, ending unencumbered cash. And you glance down through there, if any of those were negative, you would be in violation of Kansas statutes. As you glance down through there, you can see the district did not have any that ended negative. The unencumbered cash balance, a lot of times people refer to that as your fund balance or your cash carryover. You'll hear that every once in a while. I like this statement because it's really highly summarized to show you at a glance where you started the year out, how much you brought in, how much you spent, and how you ended the year. Ending unencumbered cash includes those encumbrances, those accounts payable, but it does not include accounts receivable. So if somebody paid us after a year end, such as a grant, you wouldn't have those grant receipts until the new year because they show up on a cash receipts basis. You turn to the next page, it's got the totals. You can see there we started the year out with $4,100,000 of unencumbered cash. We brought in $14.9 million, spent $14.6, so actually increased our unencumbered cash balance or our cash carryover to $4,327,000. So actually you can see there we had a pretty good year. You glance down through there, you can see we did increase our capital outlay by a little bit. That was probably one of the biggest ones. And then our bond and interest fund also increased a little bit this last year. Those are the two biggest ones that were there. But had a good year overall. Then we add back encumbrances and accounts payable. And then that last column is a reconciliation of the cash by fund. Because you may issue, those accounts payable and encumbrances are checks that you would have issued in 2021 school year, but they really had to do with the 2020 budget. So we add those back, and then there's a reconciliation of those cash balances there at the bottom of page 5. Page 6 gets into the footnotes, talks about what the school district is. Footnote number 1 by far is the longest footnote. You pick up any audit in the state of Kansas, any school district audit, we're all following the Kansas Municipal Audit Accounting Guide. So footnote number 1 is going to be pretty representative across the state of Kansas because it talks about what Kansas cash basis is, how we record our receipts, how we do the budget, how we recognize pension plans. When you turn to page 9, footnote number 2 actually starts into information that is specific to your district. Footnote number 2 talks about stewardship, compliance, and accountability, and this is where we would note any statutory violations. As you read through that paragraph, you're going to see that we did not have any statutory violations that we needed to point out this year. Footnote number 3 talks about deposits and investments. We are limited as a district of where we can invest our money and how we can invest our money. And those paragraphs talk about that fact. And then down there towards the bottom, they have what they call a concentration of credit risk. Concentration of credit risk in the accounting world is you have more than 5% of your funds at any one bank. There is a risk that the bank could fail. And how do we cover that? Well, we step up and get what they call FDIC insurance first, and then we go out and get securities pledged, meaning if the bank failed, all of our funds would be secured and you could get those back as a district. Footnote number 4 on the top of page 10 talks about a deposit in transit. The state of Kansas requires, there's 2 conflicting statutes out there, and this footnote is talking about the fact that we recorded $288,000 of a cash receipt in the June 30th, 2020 audit. The Kansas cash basis is supposed to be only based on cash receipts. But the state of Kansas passed the law that last state aid payment doesn't come until the new fiscal year, but we get to apply it to the previous fiscal year. Operating leases, footnote number 5, you do rent some small pieces of office equipment. You paid $13,836 last year in rent. And then you've got some commitments out into the new year of $12,981. The next page is the changes in long-term debt, or shows all the loans and mortgages per se of the district. Yours are broke out between general obligation bonds and capital leases. You can see there at the top of that page, you started the year out with $5.9 million. And I'm looking at the total column there. You added $419,000 of improvements with the energy facilities, and then paid down $701 to end the year with $5.6 million of long-term debt. And then the next schedule down below that is the payoff of that debt. You're going to see it's in 5-year phases and then 5-year chunks. Most of your school planning, your strategic planning is done in 5-year phases. And so we disclose that debt payment and the interest payment in 5-year phases. Footnote number 7 talks about the CAPERS plan and the fact that you are participating in CAPERS. There's a lot of information there about additional information where you can get it. The top of the next page actually talks about the fact that you paid, or the state paid on your behalf, $658,000 into the CAPERS system this last year. And then that next paragraph is that the big liability, the $5.9 million liability there. That is the district share of the state shortfall in the CAPERS system. Meaning they gave you the CAPERS system back and said that here, you're going to be responsible to pay all the retirees that are in the system. You would be $5.9 million short. We hope the general fund at the state level would eventually pick that up if that ever happened. But if we were issuing GAAP financial statements, that actually shows up as an obligation and a liability to the district. But in the state of Kansas, since we don't follow the Kansas cash basis, they do make us footnote that disclosure. We talk about your different types of compensated absences on the bottom of that page, continuing on to the next page. Talk about your early retirement plan in the middle of page 14 there, just with some numbers about how much you paid out last year and some future obligations. Footnote number 8 at the top of the next page talks about risk management. As a district, we handle risk management through the purchase of insurance policies. If you were self-funded, we disclose that fact here, but you do purchase insurance for all of your risk management. Contingent liabilities, the fact you do get federal and state grants. We don't believe, based on our testing, we would find anything material, but grantors always like to find something when they come to do an audit. Interfund transfers. As you glance down through there, we're required to make sure that all your transfers were statutorily authorized. As you glance down through there, all the transfers that you made have a statutory number beside them, so you can infer that all those were legal transfers that we made last year. And then the last footnote there talks about subsequent events, in which we talk about COVID-19. AICPA says we have to put that in all audits, no matter what the difference is, or no matter what situation is, because we don't know the outcome, the financial outcome of COVID-19 yet. And we do also talk about the fact that you did refinance your bonds in the last sentence of that paragraph. That's something that happened after year end that was subsequent but material. The next page, page 16, is schedule number 1. It is to show users at a glance that we are in compliance with the budget laws of the state of Kansas. We are required in the state of Kansas to not be able to obligate the funds unless we have the money in the bank. That was at cash basis, which was up on statement 1. Schedule 1 is we can't obligate expenditures unless we have that public approval process, and that's through your public budget process, where you have your hearings and that type of stuff. As you glance down through there, you can see that all of your funds were actually under the budgeted amount, and so we're in compliance with the budget laws of the state of Kansas there. The rest of the booklet, I'm not going to go page by page, but the general fund is the very first one there on page 17. We give a prior year numbers there so you can have some comparison. The actual column is the 2020 numbers, and then the budget column is your state budget. The state budget as it shows with the forms that you filed with the state of Kansas. And so that's why it's in the format that it's in. But you can sit down and see, like in the general fund, Prior year, we had $6,084,000. This year, $6,411,000. We had actually budgeted $6,490,000. So we actually were under budget by $79,000 with our general fund revenues. But then on the next page, you can see the expenditures come down, in which in the general fund, we are required to spend all of our budgeted amount and spend all the cash. If you have either of those items left over, you would have to return to the state. But the general fund always comes down to zero on dollars spent and on budget. Then it goes into the supplemental general fund, all the different funds after that I'm not going to sit and go page by page. The adjustments that we had were pretty small. So the numbers that you have before you, we feel like are a materially accurate representation. And we feel like the numbers that management presented previously were materially accurate for you to make good decisions on. All right, there's a letter that was in your packets. Like I said, I'm not going to go page by page. If you guys have questions, you could always ask those questions or email me or call me. Let's talk about the letter that was in there. There was a separate letter that was in board packet only. It's got some good information in it. I'm going to make light of that letter. We call it the presentation letter because as we went through the audit, if we had any difficulties encountered or you're doing something crazy with your records, we would have came to you orally and talked to you. Now we're going to put it into writing that we had no problems encountered during the audit, no difficulties. We didn't have to consult any outside accountants because we were doing something crazy. I'm making light of it because it is a boilerplate letter because we didn't have any of those kind of situations, but it is required and got some good information in it. The third page of that letter has the one adjustment that we had booked from where the numbers were you last seen them to how they show up in the audit. And then the last piece of that is what they call the management representation letter, in which it's signed between the auditor and management. I always call it the reminder letter, because as management reads through that letter, if anything was applicable, they should have talked to me about it. In your case, you're going to see it as a boilerplate letter because we didn't have any problems with the IRS, no conflicts of interest that were material, no material lawsuits. I'm making light of it again because it is a boilerplate letter, but again, management has signed it and we're required to disclose to the full board that management has made those representations to us. Is there questions of me?
Do you have anything?
Anyone?
No, sir.
I do not believe we do, Mr. Phillips. So we just need to have a motion and accept this, correct? Shelley?
Yes.
If no one has any questions of Mr. Phillips, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move to approve the 2019-2020 USD 343 audit report as presented.
Thank you, Emily. Here a second? Thanks, Jackie. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 0. Very good.
Thank you, Neil, appreciate it.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Have a nice short drive home tonight, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's in Chanute.
Yes.
Let's move right along to 5.2, Departmental Reports.
Yes, up for tonight, this is typically the time of year, we take a look at some of the reports from our various departments. Have on hand for you tonight, Craig Underhill is connecting with us, Director of Nutrition Services of the district. Also, Mr. Scripture's here for transportation. And then also we're going to get some reports from, I thought it'd be good to hear from some of our remote virtual learning, see how that's going. So both Kent Houck and Pam Powers will be presenting to that. Now, in your packets, you do have information that they've submitted, so you have that. And I've asked each of these folks tonight presenting, don't go over that word for word, give me some highlights, and because what we want is a time for you as board members to ask some questions if you have them, instead of going the word for word stuff. So if that sounds good. Craig, I think you're up first if you want to take it away.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. I do normally take advantage of every opportunity to applaud the hard work and the positive attitude of the Caw Kitchen staff. I know there's a lot going on, so I'll keep it brief tonight. The main message is that with all the challenges and the changes thrown at them, we can all be proud of how we feed our kids. Meals are available to all students, whether learning in the class or at home. We follow JB's suggestions on how to run the program, and I think it's gone very well. The other message is that should there ever be questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I know the report in front of you is just a snapshot, and there's a lot more to what's going on in the kitchen. But anytime you have a question, be glad to answer it. If you need more specific or more detailed information, I would be glad to summarize that in a report to JB to pass along. So that's all I'm actually going to present for tonight. If anyone does have any questions, I'm ready for that.
Craig, tell me about the assembly line method instead of the serve it one at a time method. So all those meals are prepared, like we see in this photograph, that everything's, styrofoam. Is that just something you prep before the kids come, as they come, and just hand it and go? How does that work?
Okay, there's two main differences in how we're doing the food service this year. One is that we had to limit choices just simply to keep the line moving. One of JB's strongest points was that if we're going to try to maintain separation, we don't want the kids standing in line waiting for their food in the cafeteria. So we have a cold and a hot option each day. In the past, we would have had a steam table or a warmer full of pans, and we would have ladled out servings. The difference this year, everything is packaged as a meal to go. The students literally walk up to the service line and they grab a thank you bag, t-shirt bag, whatever you want to call those, like you would see at the end of the line at a grocery store. They grab one of those bags and everything is in that bag so they can go and sit down and get ready to eat.
Gotcha.
The assembly line, basically we do have to prep a lot of the things ahead of time. So where we might normally just dole things out, we try to get everything ready and then build the meals as quickly as we can just before the kids come in.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
And I will tell you, downside of that is we have a lot of waste trash. We have the styrofoam trays,
A whole lot of stuff.
we have the bags, but again, the trade-off is we're moving kids through faster than not standing in line. That was some of the things. Actually, I'd love to take credit for that, but that's some of the things the state suggested to us during our statewide meetings was don't allow that standing right in front, moving slow, get them through, get them out. So I know that is a hassle. It's a little bit more time for our staff to prepare those, but Craig in the kitchen's been doing a great job getting it ready and getting them through fast.
We don't mind the trash.
You don't mind it?
You
Well, we
might
can
not.
do. Ham's like.
Ham's likes the trash.
Any other questions for Craig?
So how are we getting the kids their virtual, or their lunches? Is it all delivered?
No, they have the option, if they want it, Craig gets a call in the kitchen, and they can actually come in and get it. They let them know what time they're gonna be there, come to the back door, and it goes out. Craig, how many, on those days like right now when we're in hybrid, what's the typical average that you get people coming to pick up their lunches, their meals?
Actually, we are less than 10 every day. The ones that do pick up have the option to pick up at lunchtime, and they get a breakfast and a lunch at the same time, so they do that in one trip. I would say response has been pretty light to that offering so far.
Can we do that at all the schools to maybe save some mileage?
Could, I think we talked about doing that, but I'm not sure then, Craig, so if we had somebody call in and say, hey, I want 5 lunches, but I want to pick them up at Lecompton, there was a downside to that when you and I talked, and I can't remember exactly what that was, why we wanted to keep it in one location. Do you remember?
Well, it makes it a little bit easier because, well, for families, for example, we have two families that pick up, and they have students at two different schools anyways. So one of the advantages is that no matter where their student is, they can pick up there. We considered Lecompton for a while, but honestly, the response at Lecompton and the fact that the kids have been there most of the time,
True.
it's been working well the way we're doing it. We can change it at a moment's notice, of course, but for now, it's working well the way we're doing it.
And I wasn't looking to change the system at all, Craig. 10 just seems like a really low number to me.
It is low, yes.
Do we have concerns about students not having access to lunch because they don't have the ability to get that food?
To come and pick it up.
We haven't heard that yet. I don't know if the building levels have heard that. Craig, have you, on those phone calls, have you received any of that concern yet?
No, actually, have not. And when we had the program in the spring, I think the number of walk-ups that we had 2 kids in Perry that walked over to the middle school driveway less than 10 times during the whole time we did that. In general, there's been parents available. I would assume that if there's any younger kids at home, there's a parent or a caregiver with them, and they're going to be able to drive them or walk them over. I don't think the location or the limiting of the sites is the issue. I think it falls into the same category of free and reduced applications, and does everybody that's eligible to feed their kids for free actually fill out that application? I don't believe they do. We're not an urban school. We're not one of the high demand schools for that, and I just seriously believe that it's not something that our families need. The fact that they can, if they choose to, go get a free breakfast and a free lunch for their kids, I think just the fact that it's available to them is a great thing. But I'd be the first to admit it's a little disappointing and more people don't take advantage of that.
Again, actually, right now, every student is eating for free. There's no charge for any of our
Right.
lunches. And that goes all the way through the school year. That's a federal program.
Is there a way to continue marketing that to families and students?
Yeah, I think all of the normal methods of communication, I have seen most, if not all, of JV's communications, and he references the fact that we have this program in every single one of them. It's on the district website. It's gone out in several different ways. I don't think awareness of the program is the issue. If I was in marketing, I would tell you that doesn't matter. You keep talking about it every day. You put it out there and put it out there. I don't think awareness of the program is the reason for the low turnout.
Okay. Any other questions for Craig?
Good.
Craig,
job.
thanks much.
Appreciate it, Craig.
Yeah, thank
As
you.
always,
You and your staff,
Craig.
this has got to be some really, like everybody else, we're doing business just a little bit different than what we're used to, and we appreciate the efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.
Go with Mr. Scrimshire up next. Is that okay? Brett, we'll turn it over to you. You're here live.
You're live. If I fall over, it's just because I'm excited about transportation. Nerves are a bad match, but just going through it, the flexibility is the key to our program, just like anything else that's going on with our staff, whether it's food service or our district employees at any level. We were challenged right at the beginning with having to come up with not just one route, the green route, but the blue and the white, and that was a little stressful, I'm not going to lie. And then when we finally went hybrid and just stuck with the green route, that made our lives a lot easier. We've got a great staff. I've highlighted a few of the nuts and bolts on some of the transportation fun facts for you on the front page. Beginning at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the mornings when Anthony shows up, and our first route's out at 6:15. I mean, anytime anybody would want to go with us, we're happy to have you come along. It can be an afternoon route, but just to see how it all works. We've set in family groups. We load from the back to the front. We try to keep do a diligent job of trying to keep the mask on the kids. I think they're doing a better job as we've gotten more used to these. Keeping the mask on the drivers was a challenge at the beginning, but we got those guys figured out as well. Everybody's grown to love them.
Yeah.
Feel my sarcasm. I hate to say it, but it might be the new normal for a while. But as far as vehicles, I've got it listed on the back page. What we've done as far as sales and purchases, we purchased a newer vehicle. We kind of got a little thing going there where we're getting these returns, and this last one's a pretty good sized bus with air brakes, and so it's been a real good unit to add to our fleet. We've got it actually as an activity bus, and we took one of our activity buses and put it into the routes. But they're all kind of that C2 model Thomas, which has been real successful for us. We also sold a couple of things. We sold an older bus that we'd had some issues with, and a van through Purple Wave. I think those did very well. And that's a good avenue for us to get rid of some encumbered stuff that we've just not using. So we're kind of leaning our fleet out a little bit more as time goes on. Repairs, our guys are doing their job. The only things that can't be done is sometimes the scanning for trouble codes and things like that. And we have to send those off to Bonner Springs. It's kind of cost prohibitive. Some of that's a dealer-only item as far as getting some of that stuff scanned, so we're kind of limited on what we can do. But the boys do a good job with all that. Challenges, staffing. We've got a good group of people that are really dedicated to our students, but we're always looking for good help. And picking up Brian, was one we're going to need to use him some on activity trips and subbing if we have to. But I'll be honest with you, we've had to sub with myself quite a bit this year. I and Anthony have had to drive a little bit more than ordinarily would have. And that's just going to be part of the new norm, I think, until people are comfortable about getting in the bus or tube with 50 kids they don't know. And nobody's scared on our department, don't get me wrong, but it is a challenge to find good people that are willing to take a job where you split up your day twice like that. And it needs to be recognized. I think they do a great job. Maintaining an aging fleet of vehicles, I've kind of addressed that a little bit. Part of that's attrition, just getting rid of them and keeping up with what the current industry standards are. Monitoring use of PPE, I've already addressed that. I think that's one that needs to be reinforced, that these kids they're coming in from different environments and they're getting mixed up, and 6 foot of separation is near impossible. And some of these guys are on for up to an hour. Fortunately, we haven't had an incident where we've really had to dig through the buses and find who's the close proximity. So that's been a good thing for us in our department. But we're set up for that. We have all our routes and have all the seating charts. And if it comes to that point, we can pick those kids out pretty quickly so that they're notified. Goals, I always put this in. We've made some giant strides, but it's always nice to recognize that keeping up with the Joneses next door is difficult at times, but trying to get insurance available a little bit sooner than what the 5-year mark is would be a great goal for the district. I think it would help me attract not better, take that back, more employees that we could pick through candidates wise. And then we look at the dollar amount. I think we've made some strides there on trying to get a per hour rate that is digestible, but you go up to Oskaloosa and it's significantly more, and it gets their attention. So the word's out on some of that. So I think that's still something we need to look at. And I know the pie is only so big, but we need a bigger oven, I don't know.
You can get the state talking
Oh,
about that.
I will say, we are getting a bigger oven. We have attracted a lot of kids from Lawrence, as you might imagine, that their parents want them to school. We're about to have to send another bus over to Rock Chalk Park, over to the Lynx Apartments. We're picking up kids. We get, I'd say, one every 2 weeks, or every 2 weeks we get another kid over there. So that's really boosted quite a bit. But our goal is that one is to continue safe and cost-effective transportation for our kids, and I think we're there. So looking for any questions you might have.
What did you say it takes to qualify for insurance? 5 years?
JB could address that, but it's 5 years of part-time employee. Now, I will say that JB has stepped up because there's been other opportunities for people to get some more hours. And if they'd like to get up to a full-time status, that door is always open to get insurance, but it's 5 years.
And the thing is, we need custodial help, and that's been the offer. We've said, hey, if you want to come on, we'll take you from the hours that you use there. Some of them, it's usually anywhere from 20 to 30 hours per week that they get on that split shift, depending on how long the route is and if they do something midday. But we could easily take them up to 40. It's just the hours that we need them in custodial courses after they would get done with their route. We would want them to stay, right? Because during the school day, it's really kind of hard to get into the classroom and clean because the kids are in there. So far, the ones that we've offered that to, they didn't like the timing, didn't work out for them, but the insurance would be there if they could make it work, and do, if it was those folks that had 30 hours, you're looking at 2 hours, as soon as your bus route's done, go in and do some custodial, we got you at 40, you've got insurance. But it just hasn't been that appealing yet. But at the time frame, I think, is maybe not appealing, I should say that, okay? But it's hard for drivers, and as Rhett said, we've talked about, we can up the pay in any area, but we gotta take something from somewhere else to do it. Or you've gotta be a growing district where you have more funds from students to realize that potential, because our budget isn't one of those things, if we need more money, we go out and sell more product. If we need more money, we gotta have more kids, or we gotta have more funding from the state. That's just the reality of it.
You mentioned Rock Chalk, so do you just make one stop there and allow any of those, like, maybe potentially out-of-district Lawrence kids, if they can get to Rock Chalk, they can ride the bus the rest of the way in?
Yeah, actually, the Links Apartments, which is just what,
Right
east
there.
of Rock Chalk, and that is our primary out-of-district pickup point for New Orleans kids, and all the Rock Chalk kids, which are in our district, the kids
Right.
around that area. And then we can pick up the Baptist Church on the Farmers Turnpike and things like that, if it's easier for them to get off 10 and go there. But yeah, that's our big one.
Okay.
It's significant. Question? Anything else?
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, sir, appreciate it.
I'm out.
All right, up next, we're gonna move to some virtual. We'll start with the elementary version here first. So Pam Powers, you are up.
All right, thank you for letting me enter your meeting virtually. I appreciate that opportunity. I know that you guys have seen my slideshow presentation, so I'm just gonna kind of put some highlights of that and maybe just answer some questions. One of the things I wanted to focus on was the enrollment change and how maybe you saw that there were a lot of students enrolled at the beginning, and now we have about 21 students enrolled. I don't know if you maybe can have heard and know how the students have moved in and out of virtual school. Well, they've moved out, they haven't really moved. No one's really moved in since the beginning. But just to give you an update of that, some of the students, most of the students have actually gone back to brick and mortar Perry Lecompton buildings. So 16 of those students have actually gone back to Perry Lecompton brick and mortar buildings for different reasons, different choices, but a lot of them have. Some of them have decided to just do their own homeschool. Some of them have decided to choose a different virtual school program. Some of them have gone on to a different brick and mortar building. And then a couple of them actually are on alternate curriculums, but still kind of a part of our virtual program numbers. There are recently just one student and maybe one more that we might have to ask to make another choice because they have not been meeting the expectations that we set forth in the virtual school, what the state has asked us to have them do in the virtual program. So that's been something that we've just recently had to do. We really wanted to give them a full quarter to be able to have an opportunity to take advantage of the virtual program. And there are a couple of students that have not done very well with that. So we have had to ask one student so far and possibly one more. So there's just different situations there that we're having to deal with for enrollment. So right now we stand at 21 students for K through 6, and it's about, my biggest class actually is 6th grade, which is kind of interesting. I have 5 6th graders, and then I have some classes that have 2 students in them. So it kind of is just varied all over the grade levels. You can kind of see just the different things in the presentation there. If you have any questions about those, you can reach out to me if you have specific questions or ask them tonight too. One of the things that I wanted to focus on tonight was the students and their families. And obviously we've had some students, like I said, that have not had some success with the virtual program, but we have had some families that have had awesome success. And if you haven't had a chance to watch the 2 videos that were in my presentation. I would really recommend you watch the video of Grace. She's awesome. She is a first grader, believe it or not, but she is pretty much on top of this herself. She has a babysitter who takes care of her during the day and kind of monitors her schooling program. But I'm telling you, if I could get my fifth graders to do what my first grader Grace is doing, it would be great. Because she is doing an awesome job doing virtual school all by herself, and she is rocking it. And she is just, she's actually ahead of where she needs to be. So she'll probably finish in the second quarter around Thanksgiving time. And they plan to really just kind of take the month of December off, which is really exciting for their family. So they're looking forward to that, which is the great thing about virtual school. And a lot of the families have really enjoyed having that flexibility to have some days, you know, get caught up, get ahead, and then have some days where they can have some time off with their family. A couple of the families did not send in videos, but they made a couple of comments, and I just wanted to read a few of them. We had an interesting situation with one of our families. One of our families actually had two girls at home in the beginning, and one of those young ladies is actually on an individualized education plan. And so her mom decided that it would probably be better, even though she was getting great support from the resource teacher while she was at home doing virtual school, her mom realized that it was actually a really good idea for her to probably be in brick and mortar. So it's kind of interesting. This family has one student that returned to brick and mortar and is doing well and flourishing well there, and the teacher reported that she transitioned well back into the classroom. Her behavior was great. It was like she was never even gone. And then the mom chose to actually keep the younger girl at home, who she kind of just has a little social awkwardness, her mom describes it, and she's just not comfortable to speak when she's in a large group of people. And so this is just a great fit for her, and her mom is really excited to be able to school her at home. So that's kind of the really dynamic, unique situation that I have in my program right now with this family that has one student that is actually returned to brick and mortar and one student who has stayed at home. So what's really interesting about that is the families are choosing this option for a variety of reasons. I think most of them initially chose this option because of Corona and being worried about the virus, and a number of them are still that way. A number of them are concerned about getting sick, and a lot of them have family members or themselves or have some type of pre-existing condition or something that puts them at risk. But I think a lot of them are starting to realize, or maybe have realized as they've been educating their children at home, that this is maybe an option they might want to continue with. I know a number of the families have expressed desire to continue into the second semester. And so I know that we are going to be sending out an official survey to the family here soon that will ask them what they plan to do for the second semester and what they would like to proceed with for virtual school opportunities. And I think that there will be some families that will want to continue for the second semester. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit also about one of my fourth grade students, because I think this mom makes a really good point that her daughter has, and I'm just going to read this because she said it really well. She said, not only is she doing well in all of her classes, but virtual school has been very effective in teaching her responsibility, self-awareness, and confidence building. She is responsible for submitting all of her papers, and she no longer has a teacher that she sees for 7 hours a day, reminding her to do all of her tasks. So this student is completely responsible for her own education, and her mom is seeing this ownership that she's taking in that and being really proud of when she gets a good grade and she sees the scores that she gets, because she's actually owning her education more than what she's ever seen her own. Now, she does admit that she's getting older too, so that might be a part of just becoming older. She does admit that she misses her friends and in-person activities, but that she's really thriving in virtual school. So she wanted to thank all of you on the board and part of the administration. And I want to thank all of you as well for giving them this opportunity to educate their students at home, and for giving me this opportunity to be at home and to be a part of this program with them. So I really appreciate that. So if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. I don't know if there's anything specific, or just having general questions. I'm glad to answer that.
Pam, you just touched on it, Pam, that was going to be one of my questions. You are not in the building yourself, correct?
Oh,
No?
hang
No
on.
questions?
Hang on. Let me unmute Travis. I was trying to get everything down here.
I think you guys are on mute.
Yep, it takes me a while to get adjusted to the screen being over here instead of above my computer. Go ahead, Travis, ask that question again.
You
Sorry.
touched on it. My question was, you are not actually in the building yourself, correct?
No, I'm at home.
Yeah.
Yes. And I appreciate that opportunity. I do have a health condition that makes it pretty risky for me to be, a heart condition actually, that makes it pretty risky for me to be in the building. So it's been a really, it's been a real blessing for me to be able to be at home and do this opportunity. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I will tell you too, up front, when we were trying to transition to that, we found out that Florida Virtual School was, I think, overwhelmed would be the way to put it, because we were continually promised, we'll have it ready for you, we'll be ready to go by this date and this date. Because we started this, we were one of the first schools in Kansas to jump on this. We thought that by doing that, it would give us plenty of time to get ready to go by the start of school. Well, as Pam's kind of smiling about this now, we weren't smiling about it too much then.
No.
Pam actually put together some orientation videos, some sample lessons, some things, because it was almost 2 weeks, if not 2 weeks into the start of school before Florida Virtual actually got the platform up and open for the kids. So she did a great job finding the time, getting those kids engaged so they could fill out their daily records of their logs so we could count them as students. So I really appreciate her extra effort on that too.
Awesome.
Well, and also just the students finishing 9 weeks of school in 7 weeks for that first quarter. They worked hard, and they really persevered through that. And the parents were, you know, it was really hard, big adjustment, technology, trying to figure everything out. That was a big hurdle for not only me, but also a number of the parents. It was a bigger hurdle for even. And so it just was a slow start for all of us. But now it's really going well. And I think that I've learned a lot of new technology skills. I know that for sure. And I think some parents have too. So, and we've got really good support from Florida Virtual School now. We've had a little transition in our representatives. So I will say that the support from Florida Virtual School now is really, really good, and I've had a couple meetings, follow-up meetings with our new rep, and she's been real supportive.
Pam, you put in your report that one of the challenges was like when students would choose to maybe transfer back to brick and mortar, and that the curriculum and the standards weren't necessarily being taught in the same order.
Yeah.
You feel like overall, though, the curriculum is the same. I know you've taught several grades in person over the years, so you're familiar with that. They're getting good curriculum, but the transition, is that difficult for those students when they transition back? Do we know?
I think that the actual scope and sequence of Florida Virtual School is not really that different from other scope and sequences that I've seen at different grade levels. The only grade level I haven't taught in the elementary is 1st and 4th. So I'm not familiar as much with those grade levels, but for the most part, I do feel like the scope and sequence is very similar. Some of the things that you get out of order a little bit are like science things and social studies things, and to some extent, sometimes language arts can be, the English language arts you can get out of order a little bit too. But I will say that the standards are covered. I mean, the state standards are completely covered within the year-long curriculum. So my only concern is if a student were to go back at semester, let's say, there might have been something that they got in the brick and mortar during first semester, say like in science or social studies potentially, that they may not, it wasn't planned in virtual school, it was planned for the second semester.
That was my fear.
So
Is there any curriculum that they might miss?
No, they won't miss anything because it correlates to the Common Core curriculum, which the Kansas State standards all correlate to. So it's all correlated. I mean, when I do the K through 4 grade cards, I can just pull standards right from Florida Virtual School onto those grade cards. So it's all correlated there. It's all transitioned right to the state standards. And they use the next generation science standards as well, which is what Kansas uses for our science standards. Now, the only little difference is the social studies, it's more of a nationwide curriculum, so there's not going to be that Kansas curriculum. So our third graders are supposed to get their Kansas curriculum, and that, that's going to be a little bit unique because Florida Virtual School will not offer that. So that will be something that our students will miss, but that would be the only thing that I would see in this curriculum that our students would even potentially miss.
Aren't they gonna take a state assessment though on that material though?
Maybe not this year.
Okay.
But Jerry, I would point to, that's very similar to a student who may transfer to us from
any other
Lawrence or
district.
Crossville. I mean, there's gonna be some things, so I feel pretty confident that what those kids are getting based on what we've seen, what I've heard Pam talk about. Pretty good stuff.
It's a very rigorous curriculum too. I mean, I think some of the students that have gone back to brick and mortar honestly went back to brick and mortar because it was way more than they expected it to be. Because it is a very rigorous curriculum, especially the English language arts component of it. They encompass all of it into their language arts course. And I would say your student's going to be on, or should probably be on Florida Virtual School at least an hour a day, if not an hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half for the older students a day doing that coursework, because it is very, very rigorous.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for letting me come. I appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Pam, one more question.
Oh, yes.
You may have said this, and if I missed it, I apologize, but what is the plan for the students that are struggling?
Well, mostly what I've been trying to do is just reach out to families and see how I can help. As JB mentioned, I prepared a lot of tutorial videos for any technology issues, any Florida Virtual School issues. I have a Power School learning page for each class that has all of that information loaded up. I'm available on Zoom to my students every single morning from 10 to 11:30, except for Fridays. I'm really available to my students whenever they need assistance. And I spend a lot of my days doing discussion-based assessments with my students, which take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes for each student. It's basically a review that I do with my students before they take their test. But just trying to reach out to families to try to get them engaged in the actual platform. And I think that in the beginning, some of the families were struggling with some of the technology issues. There was some difficulties figuring out how to upload documents and that sort of thing. But I think once we got that figured out, there's just a number of families whose students are not spending enough time on Florida Virtual School to get the number of assignments finished that they need to get finished. And so I have engaged the administrators as well to help me reach out to those families that are struggling, and they have been involved with the families that we've been working with as well. So those are have been my steps to try to work with those families.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any others? Okay. Pam, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Pam.
You bet.
Keep up the good work. All right, now stepping to the plate. Can't help.
Hey, thanks folks for having me in here. Mine would have been a lot better if you'd have let me down before Pam. Than after Pam. Because I didn't do the slideshow, but I did buy my lumber from McCray Lumber. But Pam really covered it well. Obviously at the high school level, I've got the kids from 7th through 12th grade, and we started off with around 50 students, who all were assigned 6 classes each. So we're looking at about 300 classes that we were trying to monitor right at the beginning. And just like any program or any class that's being taught, the students that struggle in the classroom struggle a little bit in this as well, just because they didn't take the same, some of them don't take the same pride as the other ones take in. Overall, it's working great. The virtual setting, it's kind of the Edgenuity programs, and I don't know how familiar everybody is with the Edgenuity programs, different than the elementary situation, but they had to catch up too. So I know Mr. Malone, Mrs. Mullen, Mr. Schurslick, and Mrs. Webb just did a fantastic job getting these kids enrolled in these classes to start with, because that was a mess. If they had, because their Edgenuity wasn't ready to go the first 2 or 3 weeks either, because of all the online materials that needed. And so some of the kids didn't even get their electives until a couple of weeks in, just because there weren't programs available for them. So working through all that, we got over the hurdles in the first couple, 3 weeks, and the kids knowing when to check in and what was expected of them. And after that, it smoothed out. I could have looked at the list of 50 and known the kids that were going to do well, and know the kids that, we have a few of them, obviously, that are back in the classroom, that we kind of had an idea might struggle a little bit with it, because it is a rigorous curriculum, and you do learn a lot on the program. And and that transition that Pam had spoken about, going back in, is a tough thing if you don't keep up with the classes. So you can have somebody that's in a psychology class that has got 100% on all 3 papers they've done, but they're supposed to have 6 papers done, so they don't get 100%. They have to maintain, and time management's a key. I know one of the key factors, I know that our redesign's been put on hold, but one of the items in the redesign that we were stressed on was developing time management skills. And I will say that this program here does develop time management skills, and they learn that in a hurry. I mean, when you're in the classroom, you go from this class, and then the bell rings, and you go to the next class. That doesn't work that way for these kids. They've got to learn to get up, get themselves going, learn to get to work 6 different classes, learn how to manage their time in each class, learn how to go back to a class maybe they're not doing as well, get some help on it, do some retakes, do whatever. I'm available to them 7 days a week. I don't want to say 24 hours a day, because I do sleep every once in a while on it, but I was, while Pam was talking, I was grading 2 papers. So, I mean, so it's available for them to work on in the evening to catch up and do items like that too. And I've got some people that work Sunday for 7 hours on it. I've got some people that work 30 minutes on it, and they just got their own kind of pace that they're working on. But I do think they're learning time management skills. They're definitely getting better. We started out, when I told you, we started out around 50. We're right around the 35, 36 students now left in it. And of those are the ones I would be expecting to do well, because the Edgenuity program is really kind of and you saw that in my notes, it's a one size fits most. I mean, it doesn't, every kid learns differently, and they have different ways of learning, whether it's visual or reading or whatever it is. So some people, even though they're good students, struggle with just staring at a computer all day. And some of them just eat it up. So we've had some good success stories like she's mentioned, and we've got some that's gone back, that should have gone back and should have been in class, that needed that interaction with the students, with the other students and the teachers to do well. And so we're kicking right along. It does due to some obstacles, Edgenuity, since they weren't ready right off the bat. Some of the programs that the kids are enrolled with, and we've got over all those humps. I've done the Edgenuity stuff a couple of years prior to that, for 2 years in the library for some kids. And so I was familiar with it going in. And to this large scale, they weren't quite ready. They have a couple programs on there that are out of date on links with articles, like a little science project. They'll click on the link, but that link's no longer posted on the web. So what a great thing is so when they'll call the student, will go, I can't get you that link. I said, well, what would you do in the real world? Just close your book, put your pencil away and go home? No. Why don't you see what the article's about, look on the internet, see what you can find out about it, write the paper on that, and explain that article, that link didn't work. And so now they're getting good at making adjustments and real world obstacles because it all doesn't really happen like you all want it to all the time. So I think those are two things they're getting that they don't get as much of in the classroom because it's more orientated to just going from hour to hour to hour and they do that. But some of them didn't realize it was going to be the work involved that was involved. But I've had parents ask me, you know, are you doing it again next semester? You know, I mean, they were excited about it. They said, I mean, I live in Lawrence, and you don't know all the griping that's going on in Lawrence. I mean, they wish they were in our school district. I mean, every parent that I walk to, I don't know, you guys are doing it the right way. I don't know why we're not doing that. And that's not, I'm not blowing smoke or anything. I just hear those different things from different people, and they start talking about because they want their kids to be active and get the opportunity to participate in things. And Lawrence still isn't in school. I've got 2 or 3 buddies of mine that are teachers, and they're still not in school. And it's driving people crazy. That's a couple of school districts in Kansas City. They were trying to do a virtual program that wasn't going very well, and they were frustrated. So we've had some really good parent comments about it. And just like anything, you know, high school students, they get a little more creative on how to get out of things sometimes. So, you know, you'll get one, well, that doesn't work. I said, well, I'm looking right at it. It looks like it works to me. No one's figured out the common ingenuity. You have to put the exclamation mark and slide up. You know, there's just different little problem-solving things and humps and things that we've gotten around. So I've enjoyed it, and I think it's a good program. And I do think that when we offer it the next semester, that we should offer to the kids. I mean, we shouldn't just say, hey, it's carte blanche, just anybody can do it. I think it's the kids that have earned the right to do it and proven that they can spend the time and will spend the time. So they're not just saying, hey, well, here's an opportunity just to sit at home and not do anything, you know, for a while. So I think we've got a track record and some history, and we know what's going on. So I think it's for the kids that can stay on task and care about the results. And we've got a lot of those. We've got a lot of good students, a lot of good kids, a lot of good families in this school district. And so I've been hanging out here for 12 years or so because they're good people. So, I mean, we don't have the same, it's not the same everywhere. So I appreciate the opportunity. So I don't want to repeat everything Pam said because I've had stories too, but I'm going to limit my time and ask you guys if you have any questions for me.
So your numbers are down from where you started as well, Ken. Did I hear you right? You're down to 30. You started at 50. You're down to 36.
Yeah, about 50 to 36, and they were the right 14 and move. I mean, we knew right at the beginning. We go, well, this. I mean, I've had a few of the kids in class myself, and great kids. But if you're not at their desk going, hey, let's go. And some of those kids had parents that were working. So you can imagine a teenager sitting at home. Parents are working. He's responsible for getting up out of bed on his own. I mean, if you've read my phone on all my tests, you probably guys get a big laugh off the thing because I'm trying to get creative on wake-up calls. You know, just time to get up, you know, where you at? You know, how you feeling? Let's go, get started, log in, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of different. They log in at their own pace. Even though they have to maintain a pace to finish the course, they're all doing something. Just picture that big TV screen with with 700 televisions on it. They're all doing something different at different times. And we've worked around the kid having to go to work to get some money for the household, and then do it when he gets home. Whether he's tardy, whether they check in, they're supposed to check in with him. And I can see exactly what they're doing in ingenuity. So I can see what class they're working on, how long they spent on it, how long they just sat there and stared at it and didn't do anything. So they gives me idle time too. And so you get a pretty good picture of if there's a difficulty on where to fix it and who to visit with it. We've got some good relationship with parents, and I just had 2 conversations last night with parents, and one of them was gonna go back, and she just was a great student in school, but just couldn't stay on task when she just had to do it by herself. You know, so those are some stories and situations. Does that help you?
It does.
Travis, at all?
It does. Okay.
I'll tell you, Kent's kind of the pro at this. As he mentioned, he's been doing this for a while, and one of the things that he brings to the table is he has a great knack for motivating kids. He works well with kids, he relates well with kids, so he's been an outstanding fit for this. And again, he knows the program of Edgenuity, as he mentioned, so we really appreciate him doing that and keeping the kids rolling. So, and again, 36 kids, 7 through 12, that's still a pretty good number.
Yeah, 36, it's a good number. They're rolling right
Yeah.
now. I'm kind of looking at it going, hey, nice job, nice job. I'm going through papers. I mean, a funny story, and I don't want to keep you guys forever, but I don't even know if I told JP this or not, but Spanish, I'm brushing up on my Spanish because when I'm grading Spanish papers, you know, Spanish, and they have to actually read and vocalize Spanish, and so they record like 5 sentences in Spanish, and then I listen to them on the computer, make sure they got 5 sentences, try to conjugate my verbs in Spanish, you know, or whatever. And it was funny because there was one of the lessons you were supposed to tell about your, you were supposed to tell a story about your family and blah, 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 you know, and all that stuff, and they don't know that I'm looking at everything. Sometimes the computer grades stuff, sometimes I have to grade things. And so all I came back with is he's supposed to write this big old story about his family and what he liked to do and all this, and all his message I hit it just said, no hablo Taco Bell. So I just hit the return by sent it back to him with my comments and said, do the assignment, try Taco John's.
Excellent recommendation.
And then he knows on the other side, go, oh, wow, he saw that. So they gotta be careful. I've had papers that just you know, all the way across thinking that I'm not looking at it, and I'm going, that doesn't sound any good. Look past it, because I spend most of my time giving retakes and grading, like, essays, and doing, for exams, doing retakes and grading answers that are subjective on different tests and stuff. So I enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun to do it. Kids are good.
And the last coach, are you working then remotely yourself? Are you in the building?
I am. I'm working remotely. Now I'm not at home all the time. I'm either in my office. I'm not at the beach really. That's kind of a fake picture, and I'm really not at the ballpark right now. Although I wish I was at the ballpark right now. Okay. I'm in middle school girls basketball right now, but we're all shut down here for another week, and we'll get back to playing. And hopefully, get us a baseball season in.
Very good.
Any others? Okay.
Coach Houck, thanks, man.
Thanks, Coach.
Hey, thanks so much, guys.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Good Lord's on our staff. He's awesome. That is all the reports, correct, Mr. Elliott?
That is, sorry, it went a little longer, but I think that was really good information for you. Okay?
Let's move right along to 5.3, PLHS Handbook Update.
Yeah, what we got here is, and if you remember, I think it was last year, coaches and a committee went together, reworked some things on that drug and alcohol policy, brought that back. And again, a lot of times with anything, that's why you see version 1, version 2, version 3. Well, we went through this and I think found a few, at least one thing that we needed to get corrected when it came up. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Malone, who's here, let him cover the update that we have.
So kind of what happened is we realized through an incident in school that when we reworded all this, we left out the possession part of things. It was reworded just as the first time a student has a positive test. And so all we basically done is we've left all the wording the same, but we have just added in or is caught in the possession of a prohibited substance. Those prohibited substances are spelled out there and at the first thing, alcohol, use of alcohol beverage, forms of tobacco, and other drugs. So we added that, just added that possession piece to it. And then also for the tobacco, we were asking students that tested positive to seek a drug and alcohol counselor. We weren't sure that was really appropriate for a tobacco or nicotine thing to actually go see a drug and alcohol. So I found through the American Lung Association has what they call an in-depth program, which is an alternative to punishment for students in middle school and high school. It's 4 50-minute sessions, and it's free of charge. And so we added that in as the intervention for that first offense of a tobacco-based, whether it be a vape or tobacco. So I went through the in-depth, you just have to go through their training, so I did that training. So if they were to get caught with that, they get to sit with me for 4 50-minute sessions. And my mother passed away of lung disease, so I kind of got a little bit of a passion against smoking. So.
Pretty straightforward there.
Yeah, so we added the possession piece on each offense and then the requirement for this in-depth counseling, right?
Correct.
Including your participation, no games, just practice, correct, on the first offense?
Correct, until they get to, first offense has the 10, is it 10 days?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 10-day period, and they have to contact the counselor. If they don't, in that 10 days, then that suspension continues on.
And I know that a lot of people think this is punitive, but it boils down to the same thing we've always done. This is just, even though it may be painting these kids into a corner, it's forcing them to make good decisions.
Okay, we have a young man that has benefited greatly from this and is making much better choices. And yeah, he was
I
on
know
our
you're
first
talking about, and you're right. I wish we could say his name, because that is a success story.
Yes,
Agreed.
very much so. And I think in the old punitive thing, it might not have been. So.
Any other questions for Mr. Malone, y'all? If not, we need to make a motion to approve the handbook change.
Mr. President, I move to approve the update to the PLHS drug testing policy as presented.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Emily. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir.
If not, those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. 5.4, fan attendance at winter events. This is a report item only, correct?
Correct. We're not anticipating any motion on this at all. Just want to give you a quick update on some things that we have been working on. And when I say we, it's not so much just us here in the district. It's area school districts. It's school districts from Douglas County, Jefferson County mostly, as we've been collaborating a little bit here. Right now, of course, there is no true recommendation on crowd limits from CASHA. They've just pretty much taken a hands-off approach, except for playoff activities, which they do have control of recommendations on that as far as the amount of fans that you can have. A recent conversations really started coming up this 2 weeks ago, but then it changed a little bit this last week because, of course, you've seen the same things that we all have with the rapid increase in more and more positive tests. So I wanted to tell you some of the things that are going around. One is, and you'll see all kinds of ranges. For example, Johnson County right now, their health department recommendation has said they recommend no winter sports whatsoever. I don't believe the Johnson County schools are going to go with that recommendation. They are looking at things right now to say, well, we're going to play the games but with no crowds to try to limit those things. They're going to also look at Douglas County. I know at least for KU, they're looking at 10% of the crowd is what KU is looking at. We've talked about looking at things if we have to limit considerably, maybe parents only. maybe going up to 25% or 10% or 15%. So we're talking about percentages. And to get to that percentage, it's not just, hey, Mr. Malone, we're going to let 15% in of the seating, give them whoever you want. It would be, find out how much 10 or 15% or 20% would be. And then we divide out basically tickets, so to speak, to the players that you have. Even by doing it by tickets and players with basketball, what makes it tricky is you have 2 gyms, right? So, exactly. So if we give tickets to each player by gym, what may happen by the time a boys game at the end, a varsity game rolls around, everybody from that should be split in 2 would migrate into 1. So we haven't got all those things worked out. The thing that I feel right now, the way things are going, we're going to be lucky to get some games in. Again, going forward, we want to make sure we see that. Because again, it's about the kids. We want to try to give kids opportunities, okay? Kids need opportunities. We just want to try to do it as safe as possible. Something new that's coming out too, that I would just throw in here, Jefferson County today passed a mask mandate. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I just saw that on my phone.
Okay. So that is in place. The question is, that I asked when I heard that was, how are you going to enforce that? Well, we really don't have the ability to enforce that, was the responsibility. So that's going to be a challenge. The thing that we look at on these numbers that I go back to, we have been doing our best to give people opportunities to come and watch our kids play. And just recently, this last game, Acacia activity requires masks. When you say require masks and you look up in the crowd and there's a lot of people without masks, you think, well, maybe we have too many people coming. Because if we're allowing you to come and you're not doing what you ask, maybe we need to limit things down a little bit. So that's something we're going to look at. And again, we're not going to go out and do this on our own. We're going to try to collaborate with likewise schools, whether that's Jefferson County, the Big 7 League, Douglas County, whatever it's going to be, work together. Ticketing, we know is going to be an issue. If we allow so many tickets by kids, how are we going to manage that? You have to try to find ways to limit. If you give the tickets out and you say, okay, you have 120 tickets for your team, and you give those out, if they're certain colors, say if they're blue paper, if somebody takes a paper and go to the photocopy, they make 100 more. Well, now instead of 120 tickets, you've got 250 tickets because somebody made photocopies. We know that's an issue out there. Cheerleading is another thing we're looking at because a question came up. Do we want cheerleading part of that? And if it is, do we limit that? Because if you've been to games, you know that sometimes a cheerleading squad may consist of 5 girls. It may consist of 15 girls. How does that look? Do we want to limit that? So that's a question that our area schools are asking. Dance, also same thing. Do we want to have a dance every, a performance at halftime of every game? Do we try to limit those things down? So that's what's been on our plate of the notes that I've taken over the meetings. I was just kind of a little curious if there's any preferences from our board that I would take back in some of these meetings coming up. So I guess I'm asking for a little bit of input since this is a discussion item.
Senior dads get first priority on tickets.
Okay.
I don't care what happens. No.
I'm really concerned about people not wearing masks in our buildings. I have a big problem with that.
Yeah. What we're finding out too is in the fall sports, initially early on, everybody was concerned about those high risk of football being quarantined and cross-country kids. But the events outside, we actually saw fewer quarantines than than volleyball. So now we're moving everything to winter sports. It's all inside. Wrestling and basketball. It'll be tough.
As a parent sitting in the stands at volleyball and basketball and looking down and being like, that person needs to pull their mask up. That person needs to, when the parents aren't doing it, it really bothers me to sit there and think, you're jeopardizing my kid's season because you won't put your mask on. And that's, again, it's hard to police. By the same token, I have seen our administrators coming up and sitting down and nicely saying, put your mask on. And the person pulls it up. So I appreciate that we are trying to ask people and remind them that if they're going to be in our building and in our gym, they need to have their mask on.
Yeah, our policy with the mask is not changing, but maybe now with the Jefferson County opting back in, you know, guys, not only is that the school rule, that's now a county, county thing.
Hopefully that will help enforce it to people.
Maybe, I hope.
Maybe.
And while it can be argued, do these masks work or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No.
Put them on
Is
your
there a
face.
fine associated with the health order, or
Is there a what
a
now?
fine associated with?
Not that I'm aware of, Ryan. That's why I asked, how are we gonna enforce that? And they haven't mentioned that.
See, in Shawnee County, they can close down your business for blatant disregard of the
Yeah.
rules, which they did make someone the example.
I see.
And-
Yeah, there's no punitive thing to it, other than Jefferson County, Clay County just did the same thing today too.
I think more that's, with the numbers going where they're at, I think more that's probably coming in. Again, it's not a matter now of, I think the mask help take down the chances, obviously. But I mean, I think we need to try to do something in number-wise. Another thing, Travis, I don't know if I mentioned on that order from Jefferson County, they put a limit, that it mentioned the limit for crowds. I was told today that there was a limit for crowds of 75 for events or indoor events.
I couldn't get the
But
story open on my
schools were
phone.
supposed to be exempt from that if they so choose, which again, puts it back on the school to make the decision. So whatever decision, if it's anything different from 75, you're gonna be in a bad spot anyway.
What's the seating capacity of our varsity gym, JB?
We looked at that, I wanna say it was right around 1,600, remember right?
1,200.
1,200? So it's,
When I counted for volleyball, it's gonna be 50%, I counted, well, I didn't count those little rows up front, because I had 610 on each side, so 1,250 maybe if I counted the front two rows as well.
and we went 50% volleyball, and I'm gonna tell you, it felt packed in there.
It did.
It did.
Yeah,
I thought, boy, 50%
and we didn't
in
even
there.
get the whole 50%, we were even under that, so.
But with both sides of the gymnasium being, go ahead, Ramon.
Could we take such a drastic measure and make one side of the bleachers no mask, that's what you choose, and the other side mask, so that the ones that don't want to have a mask can be exposed to everybody else in their side?
I think if you do that, you're going against the county order now.
Jeff West had that for football up there, Ramon, this year, and it was a mask optional section and a mask required section. But I agree with JB, now that Jefferson County has opted back in, not wearing a mask is no longer an option. But, so we can opt out and go every other row and block it off. 25, so we could have 400 people in there, at 25% capacity, give or take, right?
Could, but the thing is, when you block off a row, you really don't block off a row.
I understand,
Yeah.
but, so say you've got 60 kids out for basketball at the high school, boys and girls combined?
Yeah, right, yeah, 30 per, yeah.
So just a 2 per kid, that's gonna keep you under that 25%.
It would,
And I just picked that 25% just because that's just the number.
I think it would, I mean, and the questions come too, we have some parents that go to, just like my wife, she goes to watch the band. But, you know, do you have the band, do you limit the band, we talked about that, we're gonna have to cut back on some of those things. Maybe it's partial band, I don't know.
There's parents at the football game last week that were just there to watch their child who's a cheerleader.
Yes,
So, I mean, you hate to put them on.
Then, JB, does the number change if the numbers get worse as to the percentage you didn't have?
that hasn't been mentioned, but I can't imagine that everything would stay the same if we continue to get worse, and we're gonna find out pretty quick, I have a feeling.
Right.
You know, something that I have noticed at some of the other schools that I've gone to for just middle school sports right now that have been in the gym, some schools said, if you are fans of the visiting team, make sure you're sitting across from the visiting bench. So Perry people are all on the same side of the gym, and, you know, in a volleyball scenario or even a basketball scenario, visiting teams stay on your side of center court and home teams stay on your side of center court, so the fans aren't mixing in the stands.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I know we don't post anything like that anywhere, but some of the schools that I went to had it posted to please stay on your side.
Of course, for volleyball, Dre, you can't do that.
Volleyball-
On the same side.
You couldn't unless we had one school where we had the whole gym, and then you could. But,
Wrestling meet, they had sections separated out like that for every school. So I think they're trying to do that.
And JB hit on this, you know, at the end of the day, guys, are these rules, are we going overboard? We don't care. At the end of the day, it's to keep these programs going.
Absolutely.
Well, I think if that's really what we're trying to do, we should just allow 2 tickets for parents and try to keep the program going, because it's gonna get worse quickly.
But if you had 2 tickets for every player, and then every cheerleader and every band, can we do that and stay at 25%, or stay at less than capacity?
if you have a child participating in anything that night, you should get 2
Because
tickets.
there's so much more going on at a high school basketball game than high school basketball.
Right,
And that's, forgive me, that's part of the fun of
right,
it.
right.
I think what you
The
get
cheerleaders
into,
and
too, that we found earlier, Ryan, on the 2, you'll have some split families.
Right.
All right,
No,
so that kid may get 4 because, you know, mom and stepmom and dad and you know, those types of things kind of play into a little bit. We'd have to factor that. I think we have to look at, we may have to filter down on how many, if we do band also, how many band members, if we do cheerleading, how many cheerleaders. I think we have to filter some of that down a little, just to kind of make, if we stay at 25%. 25% is what we kind of talked about, but again, I'm not so sure that by the end of the night, if it's 25% and they stay in those 2 gyms based on those teams, I think would be okay. If we start migrating and get our 25% ends up to be 45% in one gym, then we've got.
Well, it may be, at our school, that freshmen, people attending the freshman boys or girls game have to come through one of the doors at the high school, and you cannot go
Through the
into
gym.
the Morganson gym.
And we have the ability to do that, it's just, you also have some kids who play JV and then go up and are.
I get that,
Yep, okay.
but, you know, at the end of the night, and you've seen it before, after the freshman games are all over, the big gym gets really full at the end of the night.
Correct. That's what everyone's worried about. So, again, I think what I'd like to take about, I like the idea of the 2. From what I'm hearing a little bit is definitely, I didn't hear anybody say, 50% was about right. I heard everybody say that was probably a little much. And again, understand too, some of that may be dictated to us based on what the counties will say or allow. I don't expect anything coming from Keisha, although I think that would be the absolute best. If Keisha said, here's what we're
I
doing
disagree, their ability to.
across the state. Well, like I said, they won't come back with that. But I think something consistent would be nice, knowing what you're
I
going to
agree with the
do.
consistent part, let Keisha make that, no way.
Another idea that is something that I heard just from somebody I know that's in a different school, that their league was discussing as a league that they would not take cheerleaders to away games, that your cheerleaders only cheer at home games and don't travel to away games.
Heard that too.
And the other thing we get into because of our league, Dre, is you know that Holton, Jeff West, Royal Valley are gonna travel well, and our gym's gonna be at near
Oh,
capacity.
yeah.
Don't wanna point the finger at them or blame them, but the Riverside night, you may have 24 fans there.
Right. That's a long
So
trip.
we could take advantage of that, maybe having more band members that night and their parents. I mean, our plan all along is to be nimble and be adaptable, and maybe it boils down to something like that. But even Nemaha and Sabetha travel pretty well for
Pretty
being
well.
as far as they are.
But, I mean, even if we offer so many tickets to the opposing team that night, and with the caveat that if you're not using them all, give them back so we can get a few more of our parents or fans in and still, you know, be within that capacity.
Well, again, I think that helped me out, just kind of getting some feelings there of the notes here that I've jotted down. I would also tell you this, if we're in a red situation, it's not going to really matter,
Right?
just so you know. Because if we end up going to a red, they're saying no sports. One thing that we have asked for Jefferson County is at least the ability to finish off our fall sports if the county health department will allow us, if we go to red, okay? And I've already answered this question multiple times over the last 2 days with some things that, Mr. Malone and I talked about allowing some flexibility for the musical and the football students on, even on going remote to try to help things finish. And the comment that comes back, well, this is just, you're all about football. This is all about just activities. I want to point out to you, and I hope that you reiterate this to parents too that ask you, we're about kids. We're about kids. The reason we are having elementary students go every day is because we're about kids. The reason we're trying to work through a hybrid and get our numbers down and get our kids back into schools because we're about kids. The reason we're going to bat for our football team or our musical because we want them to have an opportunity because we're about kids. It's not about a team. It's not about sports, it's about kids. So I hope parents understand that. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. All right, that helps me out, Travis. Thank you. Anything else anybody want to add on that before we move on?
Let's move along to 5.5, testing in schools, COVID-19 testing in schools.
I've been briefing you on this the last couple of weeks on your board notes. I've asked Jill to come in. By the way, Jill has been busting her tail this last week. I've sent you updates on what's going on with our COVID situations. Good news, by the way, by you guys allowing the school district to start with class on August 19th, realize you got in a 9 weeks of school before we hit. You had kids in front of teachers more than a lot of schools around, without a doubt. But it's hit. And Jill will attest to you that the things that are troublesome when going through testing is going to be not just getting a positive test and dealing and making sure that person or that parent knows, hopefully, when the health department, whether it's the state or the county, contacts them, how the isolation works, that they have to be in if they're positive, and how the quarantine works. Tracing down those close contacts, which also has been falling on our building principals. Mr. Malone's worked with that, Aaron Mullen's worked with that. Not too much yet in Lecompton Elementary. Perry Elementary, we had one staff member that she's back today, and the kids that are in quarantine should be back on Thursday, but that hit us pretty hard. So what Douglas County is offering to do is countywide do a random testing, and I put the highlights down there and I put the full information down there for you. Again, there are some positives as you can see, but there are also some things that will cause us some concerns. And along with our local health expert in here, Jackie, you may have some information. You're in the health field on this one also. But I think what the board needs to decide tonight after looking at this and discussing is, do you want to go forward with this random testing? And understand too, the parents and the staff have the right, they can opt out. They can say, you know what, I don't want to do this part of it, we're going to opt out. It is not an everyone test thing, obviously. It's not a 3 times a week thing. It's whoever's in the pool gets random selected. 2 weeks later, whoever's in the pool will get randomly selected. So I want to clarify that. So, Jill, you've kind of looked at this too. We've talked about it. Again, she's here to help answer questions before we make a decision on this. And I know you've got questions, so see what we can do.
No questions?
Jill, what do you see as challenges with this?
So I worry that we may have had asymptomatic students and we'll have false negatives when they are tested. So we would have to contact trace those students. I think statistically, they say like out of 34 tests, the saliva test, 32 would come back accurate. And you may not think that that's a big deal, but 2 students and quarantining all those students around them as close contacts can be a pretty big number, especially if they're in extracurricular.
Well, because this Douglas County rules, Jill, you have a positive test, anyone in close contact with or without their mask goes to quarantine, correct?
Well, it depends on if they're within 6 feet, 10 minutes, yeah.
But one, in the Douglas County Health Department makes you quarantine whether you had a mask on or not, true?
Yes.
In Jefferson
Yeah.
County, if you had a mask, you are not a close contact.
Right, in the school setting, but in like basketball or band or other activities, you're required to quarantine, yeah.
Right.
Is it just this type of testing that's that inaccurate, or are there, I mean, or is it other testing that's, I guess my question is what's the point of testing if they're not accurate? If we got,
I think from this one, it's the ease of collection, if I had to guess, because you're putting saliva in a vial, as opposed to swabbing the nose, which is obviously very uncomfortable. It's unpleasant if you've had that done. So I think that's part of it. I think because it's less intrusive, they feel that parents might be more likely to opt into this, maybe.
How many tests are we talking about? I see it twice per month, but
So from what I've been told, and I didn't put this on there, you're looking at high school students, a random, selecting 20 out of the random pool, elementary 10 out of the random pool.
Every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
It wouldn't take very long to go through the whole student body.
No. And you can test positive for 90 days also.
After your,
Yeah,
Yeah, if you've had it, you would be positive.
for 90 days.
Also, I mean, for study purposes, I don't know what it's gonna tell us if we don't test the same students every time. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I think I would feel better about this if I knew it was, hey, we're gonna test everybody. But again, everybody's not gonna opt in, but we would know. Or if we said, we're gonna test the same kids and come back and do a follow-up or something, I think that might be. Or if you test, you say, okay, nobody go anywhere. We know who's positive, now we're gonna isolate it and get this thing shut down, but that part of it isn't realistic, because you could literally have a kid test, here's the other side of it, you could have a kid test negative tomorrow, and then on Thursday, if they're at a friend's house or go to, not anywhere, to Walmart or Dillon's or wherever, they can pick it up there. So again, it's that area to test, it's gonna be tough.
The young man, the seventh grader that had,
Yep.
we have still not, his family was all negative. There was all the quarantine, there was no positive test coming out of that. So my question is, do we even know where this young man contracted it?
I think, yes, that's been traced back from a family member from out of state.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing because we have 5 that are active positives right now, I believe. From the best that we could tell on those 5, none of it came from exposure in the building. Let me say that again. Our exposures aren't coming from the building, it's coming from outside of the school day. And even though we have all these kids in quarantine also, so far the best that I can see is perhaps 1, and I have a question mark on 1, maybe coming back to being in contact with a student that was positive previously. But that's even questionable. But that's kind of what we're seeing.
you're guessing, I mean, you're throwing a dart. Yeah, you're around somebody's positive, but you could be around 30 other people that are positive.
Absolutely right, Nick.
And I'm trying to understand the benefits of this program. I mean, we're testing a small percentage by the time we get to the point of the people that opt in or do not opt out. And we're testing them twice a month. So I don't even know if we'll get to 20 kids by the time people make this decision, because everybody's so sensitive to this issue, especially when you start talking about a teenage kid that you're going to randomly test
Or
for
younger.
COVID. And, you know, people are going to freak out about what else you're doing with that. So I don't see a benefit here, and the noise we're going to get and the pushback we're going to get if we do approve something like this, I think is just going to be not worth our time. And this environment, I'm sorry, I was talking, Ramon. Now, in this environment, I just don't see that it's worth it to us to go through the headache and the pushback we're gonna get for something that's gonna produce very little value. And go ahead, Ramon, I'm done.
Yeah, I was gonna agree with you. Also, the thing that concerns me is that somebody tests negative, then they feel like they have a free ticket and they'll go out and, I don't know, someone go and mess around or whatever, so it's false.
Yeah. I agree, these teenagers are feeling pretty bulletproof because they know that they have a better chance of getting struck and killed by lightning than they do of dying from this. And you can see that from their socialization. There's just not a lot of fear of this amongst our high school kids anyway. I can't speak to anybody else.
Well, and are we having, I guess this is not entirely related, but I'm really concerned about families getting together for the holidays and things like that, and the blowback that we're gonna have from that, because from what I'm seeing, people aren't masking up around family.
Well, just for example, the staff member that tested positive, I don't think any of the students that were close contacts are symptomatic, but the 8 family members she was around all tested positive.
Right.
So.
Right, and so when we're talking about, school seems to be a relatively safe place, but we're about to get an influx of,
Mr. President, I'm over this.
What's that?
I'm over this, I'm ready to move on, I don't want to test these kids.
Well, that appears to be the consensus. No motion means we keep on chugging down the tracks like we've been doing without this program. So if someone wants to make a motion, we can certainly put it to a vote. Dies from lack of a motion. Let's move along. Where are we at?
We are, no executive session.
That's what threw me off. Let's move right along to reports and communications.
Not even option tonight.
No, it wasn't added, I didn't really want to add one for you, so.
It's good.
I've already mentioned the mask order that we got information on today. The limit on the groups is 75, the exception for schools, you're aware of that. Of course, you know the numbers on the rise. Here's one thing I'll tell you, just some quick percentages that the last time we checked, we had a conversation about. Lecompton zip code, which we always take in an average, Lecompton zip code is over 15% positivity rate right now. Douglas County itself, I believe, is going to be over 10 this time as a whole, and you know where that puts you on positivity as one of our 3 factors. Jefferson County is over 12%. That was of last Friday. They told me today, quick numbers on the phone, that we have jumped up to 153 positive cases in Jefferson County. So we're typically had been running between 20 to 30 was high. Okay, in the past, before we got into, I'm going to say a month ago, you were seeing 10, 12. The numbers are going up. And again, Travis, as you said, I think a lot of kids, not wearing the mask, not worrying about it, it's not helping. I think sometimes, again, whether we have more exposure, more indoor activity, I don't know what's going on, but I'm telling you the numbers are going up. So with that being said, that means that category is definitely going to be red. That category will be red. The increase, the other category we look at is what are the numbers doing? Are they increasing, stable, or going down? Obviously we know they're increasing. The only thing that's going to be green that I can see this week will be that hospitalization number. So you're going to have red, and a green. I know what the counties are going to want us to do. They're going to want us to see getting more kids out of schools. Right now, we are in hybrid. Again, hybrid is your 7 through 12, 2 days in class, the rest online. Your elementary, all in. If it were to move another level, what that would take, if you went to that orange phase, would be you're going to be 7 through 12 full remote. That means they don't have those 2 days in. And it would be hybrid for your elementary, which would be 2 days in, day of remote, and we flip the groups that way. That will cause issues with your parents who have struggled with daycare. But again, understand, I know what the counties are pushing for. I don't know how long we can stay away from getting to at least that orange level. Just letting you know that. We have another meeting tomorrow. Actually, I have 2 meetings tomorrow, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, again with both counties. Heads up there.
I have a question.
Yep.
Follow up to that. Jill, in your opinion, we heard today that Pfizer's got a vaccine that's showing promise. If that were to get implemented, are we talking 6 months before this is in the history books? Are we talking a year? Are we talking maybe never? What do you guys think?
It'll be here for good.
Never.
It's the same as influenza A and B. I mean,
Okay. So will this shot be a once a year thing like a flu shot, or?
that would be my guess.
I would think so,
So it's a shot, not a vaccine? Because to me, vaccine's something you get when you're a kid and it goes away forever.
right?
Or a flu shot is a once a year roll of the dice.
It's okay to say you don't know.
It's hard
Yeah.
to know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think, nobody does. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay?
So,
Yeah, still like a shirt like that.
I agree with Jackie, though, this is never going away.
no, it's right.
This is never
So
going
what
away.
Pfizer came up with today is not a vaccine, it's a shot. Correct?
two shots from what I read. You have one and you follow up with a second a week or two later, if I saw that right. That's the Pfizer.
Like the swine flu, a type of coronavirus, I mean,
There's
all the,
like 20 different.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be like the flu.
Okay.
But it's still a pandemic, and they ebb and flow
Yeah.
through history. The plague is still around, you know? It's just not a major issue.
Next thing I have, musical. We are looking at, again, we were hopeful, thought we had a nice plan on Saturday morning.
We did too.
We were gonna put those kids in a remote, try to keep them out, lower the exposure with both the kids in the musical and on the football playoff run. Then a few hours later, we found out that we had a few more quarantines going on musical. I understand, right, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that's moving to December 5th is what you're looking at?
What we're looking at, you had to work on getting the performance rights moved, and I haven't heard back on that yet.
And the possibility that could be a recorded type of thing?
So, yeah, they're looking at actually possibly recording it on the 6th. So they would do a couple dress rehearsals on the 5th and then record on the 6th, possibly, depending on where we're at in numbers, letting parents come to the recorded performance.
Yeah.
And then they would be able to do, my understanding is that they're allowed to then air that performance on a set date. In other words, they can't just put it out there on YouTube and let it run. They've got to air it on a certain date.
And there would be any cost for that anyway to recuperate?
I think we could charge a small fee to watch.
Okay.
So that you would still get some ticket
Mhm.
admission.
It'd be nice to kind of offset that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, the dinner theater's a big moneymaker for you, isn't it? Usually?
It's been, yeah, the musical department, yeah.
Yes, for the musical department, yes.
Yeah.
All right, next thing, again, as you know, only the one fall sport remaining. Again, I've two conditions on that. Right now, if you say, how in the world can we continue with football? The conditions to keep it playing would be, again, there cannot be a positive case on the team. Jill mentioned the high-risk activity. Football is a high-risk activity. If there's a positive,
We're done.
you're done, okay? No matter what, no matter how many parents might call, you would be done.
And you're seeing that across the state, right?
Absolutely.
You're seeing teams.
But I will tell you, it doesn't matter how many times you see it, you still hold out hope and think if I call the right person, I can get it changed. And it just doesn't change.
And for the record, anybody listening out there, when you're texting me at 11:33 PM, you're not gonna get my mind changed even a little bit that much, just for the record.
I think the biggest questions that we get, especially with sports, it deals with quarantine. The number one thing is, can I go get a test for a negative? And I think it was one of the Douglas County ladies that said, again, she's dealing with a larger population. She said she wanted to get tattooed on her head. You cannot test out of quarantine because that's the question that comes up the most.
So you're quarantined based on the county mandate. You're done for 14 days or 10 days or whatever it is.
Right. So
You go get tested, you're negative. That's fine, that's great, you're negative, but you're still quarantined, right?
That's
There's no
correct.
change in that.
That doesn't change. Nick, that is well said. I wish everybody got that.
Because 3 days later, you could turn
No,
up
no,
positive.
I get it, you can't test out of quarantine. It's good to know if you've been around somebody,
It is.
right? I
Yeah.
get that, but you're still not, hey, I'm going back to school now because I'm negative.
You're not, and there is no requirement that you have to go get tested if you are in quarantine.
Right.
That's another one we get asked a lot. Well, where do I have to get my test? Or another one we get is, okay, my daughter who's a junior in high school is in quarantine. What about my 6th grader and 5th grader?
Right.
Well, they're not.
You're not in close contact with somebody that's in quarantine, therefore you're quarantined,
Exactly.
right?
So that's a big one we have to communicate a lot too. And then the big struggle lately has been the letters of quarantine from the county or the state. They are so overwhelmed that they can't make contact with everybody fast enough who's going in as a close contact in quarantine. So that's been a big issue because it's been, well, I haven't got my letter, so I'm not in quarantine. No, you're a close contact. We can tell you what it's going to be based on the information. The way it's been described by county health officers, you assume people do the right thing if you tell them, hey, you're a close contact. You can't come back until whatever date. Again, the school can't quarantine. We don't have that legal authority. The county can, but county typically isn't issuing a quarantine order unless they're forced to do so. We've seen that a couple times,
Yeah, we have.
believe it or not, that somebody was persistent enough that they actually issued an order. So that's a big one there. But again, this is just going to be a week by week thing right now as we move on what goes on, what's going to be allowed if we're orange, red, or who knows. So
I know you had sent out that you were talking about letting the musical kids and the football kids do a totally remote and not come into school at all. Do we have kids that are actually doing that, or they?
Yeah, we have about 26 football players, I believe, that opted for that.
So we've given,
Because they want to finish their season.
and that option is open to whom?
So it was open to those that are on the active playoff roster only.
And when we set that up for the kids in the musical, their performances this week was.
But once we had canceled that performance, we pulled that option back.
And the thought was to try to limit exposure, to give them more of an opportunity. It may not matter if tomorrow we get the news that where we're going, everybody, may at least 7 through 12 may be there anyway. May not be an issue. And if that happens, my guess would be, Nick, just so you're aware, that they would also say the current winter sports, if you're in orange, they would say you're on because they would just pull those off. And the winter sports we have going on would be wrestling at the middle school, girls basketball. Girls basketball, I believe, is already shut down right now. Until, okay.
That was because of a positive test of came going well. Okay. Yeah.
That will make parents happy too, I'm sure. So just a heads up on that, if you start getting some calls or texts, that could be something. So that's all the great news I have, Travis.
Thanks.
On you, JV Sunshine. Give me something more enlightening than that, Edward.
Well, I don't think I'm going to talk about or bring up COVID, I hope, so I'm kind of worn out on that. I just wanted to update the board on our vacancies that you saw. We had 4 retirements earlier that you guys approved, and already have started recruiting to replace those people. I participated in a online career fair last Thursday through Emporia State and visited with about 10, I think 10 of 11 actually showed up on Zoom. And I visited with them for 10 or 15 minutes and had a second interview with one of them today through Zoom. We were looking to hire that second title position that we still have open. Remember earlier we didn't have anybody apply, but now we have December approaching and universities have early graduates. And we were able to snag an early graduate from Emporia State and offered her a job today for that second title position, and she excitedly accepted it. Robin Hartpence, who took the title position last Labor Day and had to miss part of January, we worked out a deal with her where she's going to take the 2 weeks off in January to go spend time with her daughter when she gets home from deployment, and then she's going to come back. So we will go second semester with 2 title teachers, which we're very excited about because we haven't had intervention support for our kindergartens and 5th and 6th graders. So I know our 5th and 6th grade teachers will be excited for that. One thing of concern, obviously, is Pat Winchester's retirement. That's a very difficult position to replace, and the only university in Kansas that I'm aware of that even offers that is Fort Hays State. So we have reached out to them to see if they have any graduates, because we'd like to snag them early since we have this early retirement policy, and we know that Pat is going to retire. Nothing yet, but Erin has a connection out there since she graduated from Fort Hays State. She's going to be connecting with that individual here this week, and hopefully we're going to get a lead on somebody. I have no idea how many graduates they even have coming out in May for industrial arts at Fort Hays State, but I thought, and JB and I both had thought Pitt State had a program, but they don't. When I went to their site, they no longer offer it down there, so I was kind of surprised by that. Let's see.
That being said, Mr. Woodward, there's not only Mr. Winchester, but there's some big shoes to fill there on those 4 retirements. Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, maybe it's an indication of how old I'm getting, but those kids that I interviewed last Thursday, I felt like I was interviewing junior high kids. I'm like, you're going to turn you over loose to a group of kids are going to eat you alive. But no, actually, for the most part, they were pretty good interviews. But they're just so young and raw. And, you know, like you said, when you think about Mark Armstrong being replaced by a brand new teacher, that's going to be a lot of work on that guy over there. And so hopefully, you know, we've heard some rumors from area school districts and teachers that are experienced in other districts that want to come to Perry-Lecompton and might be, I know Seaman, I've heard from Danny Miller at Seaman, there's a guy over there at Seaman High School that would like to come here. And there's another district, I can't remember where it was. So we have interest from other districts, candidates there, so hopefully we'll get some experience there, but we'll see what happens. But you're right, it's going to be tough to fill some shoes. And it has been in the past few years as we've gone through all the retirements that we've gone through.
Are those jobs posted currently?
Not yet. I was going to talk to JB tomorrow about when we want to do that, because obviously we just went through the approval tonight. But we should be getting a jump start on a lot of districts, I think, because a lot of times they wait till, and of course I don't think that's going to happen anymore now because it's so competitive. But it used to be you'd post in March, you know, for teachers, and administrators would be in January or February, but I think it's getting earlier and earlier now. So.
That would be something too, if people ask, well, why do you have so many retirements right now? Because they're taking advantage of that date that you negotiated in. That's working.
It's working just like we wanted it to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And Mr. Armstrong will continue to do the live broadcast.
Yes.
Correct?
He's
I've had that
insistent.
question too.
Yes.
We have a long-term contract with
I think we do.
Yeah.
Adidas.
Gets a free soda and a bag of
Yeah.
popcorn.
That's right.
He's good to go.
He would work for that, I think,
He
too.
will. Yeah.
All right.
Well, but look how many years ago has Mr. Landis been
Oh, yeah.
retired? I mean, I know
Yeah.
he floats it in and out of here as a substitute, but
Yeah. He's still hanging around for popcorn.
Yeah.
you guys are a lot of fun to listen to, I'll tell you that.
Yes.
Lots of compliments from people around. Only other thing I wanted to mention is gosh, I don't know when it was, 4, 5, 6 months ago, I talked about the qualified admissions change that the Board of Regents were proposing. That was passed in October. So that requirement for pre-college curriculum is no longer there for the Regent schools, the universities in Kansas. It basically boils down to a 21 ACT for all the universities. Actually, KU's, yep, 21 for KU. Then it's or a GPA of certain GPA. With Fort Hays State and Emporia State, it's 2.25 GPA, so it's really a C minus average on whatever courses you take in high school, and you can get into those universities. K-State used to be the same as those, but they've moved up, and they're pretty much expecting the same thing as KU now, 3.25 or 21 on the ACT.
That's
So
an or, right? Not an and.
or, correct.
I thought KU was an and.
No, KU is an and, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mike. KU is an and. And KU takes it a step farther too, and they go, you can also have a lower GPA of 3.0 and score a higher ACT at 24. So they've kind of got that step in there as well. But they're allowing super scoring with the ACT, which if you're not familiar with that is, if you take it 3 times, they'll take the highest score from each of those parts and put them together.
Oh.
So that's kind of an advantage for kids who take it more than once.
What was that rule? I need.
Just take one section at a time.
You can't keep adding them together.
Nice try, Travis.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
One other thing they did, if you do take any college courses in high school, it has to be a 2.0 or higher average. If a kid doesn't take any, no big deal, but if you do take a college course in high school, it has to be a 2.0 or higher. So interesting changes, and I found it kind of interesting reading an article today where they talked about they're kind of lowering the requirements to get more people in, and one of the guys, I can't remember who it was that they interviewed, said that he felt like the requirements were increasing. I never did quite understand where he was coming from, thinking that they were increasing when you take away that scholars curriculum program that we were requiring, but we no longer are. So at any rate, I think that's it.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Ramon, you had a couple of meetings. You want to tell us about those?
Yeah, we had a lot of information tonight, so what I want to do is send some information to JB. We met for 3 hours this last meeting at Keystone and established some goals and objectives for the director. We also had a presenter from, we talked about qualities that we were looking for, or what we were expecting from the executive director. So I have like a 3-page document, and I'm gonna forward it to JB and have it sent to you guys rather than going through it and taking your time. But it was a very, very productive meeting. Probably one of the first in 3 years. So I'll be sending you through JB some information from the director, so you will be more informed as to what heck's going on with Keystone. And that's all I have.
Dr. Hart worked for KSB, I
Yes.
assume?
Yes.
Just want to make sure that was right. Okay. Well, I'm down to 7. I'll entertain a motion to go home, you know.
I'll move.
Thank you. Here, a second?
Second?
You ready? Seconds. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor? We're out, 7-0. Jill, thanks a million.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Ramon.
And thank you for the yearbook. I don't know where those came from. Is that you, JB, Mr. Malone?
Expect one every year if I remember to get it out to you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.